Good morning, Brentwood Oaks friends. I'm so glad that I've been able to teach this adult class over the last couple weeks. It would have been way better to look you in the face and talk to you that way, but hopefully you've been encouraged over the last couple weeks as we've been looking at the Gospel of Luke and really looking at this period of the Gospel here where Jesus really reveals who he is. And today is no different. As we look at Luke chapter 8 and 9, we're gonna see a lot of that pattern continue. I think last time we were together, we talked about the idea that Luke really is a gospel where we are learning to trust, where God is continually, through Jesus, helping us see that he is trustworthy. And so today, as we continue this series, keep that in the back of your mind, this idea that we are learning to trust God through all these things. So to start, I want to ask you this question. Over what things do you have power? I think for us, power or control are very powerful forces in our lives, right? Maybe when you hear this question, over what things do you have power, maybe you think about your job. Maybe you have a lot of control or power at your job. Maybe you think about your home or your family. Maybe you think about influences you have with friends or something else. But over what things do you have power? Your own decisions? Those are all good and wonderful things. But as we take a look this morning, today, in Luke chapter 8, I think we're going to see things maybe a little bit differently. In Luke chapter 8, we're going to be thinking about the power that Jesus shows over lots of different things. And in Luke chapter 8, starting in verse 1, Jesus begins to tell the parable of the sower. And you probably are familiar with it, but if you are not, Jesus tells a story about a man going out to sow seed, and he sows seed on the path, but the birds quickly come and take it. Then some seed falls on the rocky ground, and the seed takes root, but it's really shallow and it dies quickly. Then some seed falls among the thorns, and the plants grow up, but then they are choked out by the thorns and they die. But then some seed falls on the good soil, and the plants grow and yield a crop many times over. And Jesus compares that to people who hear the gospel, people who hear the word of God. For some, it's taken away quickly. For some, it's shallow and they don't have good roots. Some, the thorns choke them out quickly. The worries of this life come into play and they overwhelm those who have heard. But then there's that good soil, those people that the gospel really takes root in their heart and they grow in their faith. This was a huge thing for Jesus to say. This idea that it could be different for everyone as they are developing their faith. Really big and bold idea from Jesus there. And then in verse 16, he talks about this lamp on a stand, that no one lights a lamp and puts it under a bed. Instead, they put it on a stand to give light to everyone. He's talking once again about sharing that gospel message. So very early on here, we see that Jesus is showing power over teaching. He is showing power over teaching. This is big, bold teaching, and Jesus is showing that he has mastery over that thing, that he has power over teaching. Well, as we continue on now, I want us to take a look at the rest of this, and we'll see Jesus showing and asserting power in different ways. So this teaching immediately shows some great power and authority, like we talked about a couple weeks ago. And as we look here in Luke chapter 8, we're going to continue to see that power manifested in different ways. right? So in Luke chapter 8, verse 22, Jesus is with his disciples, and he says, hey, let's go to the other side of the lake. They get in this boat and they go, and this storm comes up, and Jesus is asleep. But check out what it says here in verse 24. It says, the disciples went and woke him, saying, Master, Master, we're going to drown. He got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided and all was calm. Where is your faith? He asked his disciples. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him. All right, so they are in this storm, and it is bad. Jesus is sleeping, and they go and they wake him up, and they say, we're going to drown. Like, don't you know what's going on? How can you sleep through this? Jesus gets up and rebukes the wind and the waves. He tells them, stop, be calm, and they do. It's this incredible moment. Like, have you ever tried to, maybe here in Texas we would think about, saying, all right, it's time to rain. We don't necessarily, nobody tries to rebuke nature because we all know that we have no authority over it. But Jesus in this moment has authority over nature. And so not only does he have power over teaching, but he also has power over nature. This idea that Jesus, in the middle of this storm, is able to command over nature is just incredible. No one else has this power. No one else can make it rain or stop raining. No one else can cause droughts to cease, but Jesus can. And so we see that he has power over teaching and that he has power over nature. Well, as we keep reading here, they sail on to the region of the Gerasenes, and Jesus displays power over something else. Look at verse 27 with me. It says, just kidding. It says, when Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but he had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them because they were overcome with fear. So he got into the boat and left. This story may be a familiar one to you. This crazy scene where this man had been possessed by demons. He had like many demons. This isn't just one. I don't know what the scale is on that, but all these demons had been in him, controlling him, breaking chains, getting out of places that he had been confined. And these demons had controlled him. And Jesus he starts talking to the demons and calls them out of this person. Drives him into this herd of pigs. The pigs rush off, and then the man is back to normal. Like, who else would have power over that? So once again, we've seen that Jesus has power over teaching, that he has power over nature, but also that he has power over the supernatural, that Jesus has power over the supernatural. This is not something that's normal. This is not normal here. Jesus has power over things that nobody else, like, it's super impressive that he can control nature, but also the dark forces of this world, these people who had been demon possessed. He controls these demons and he drives them out. Jesus has power over the supernatural. Well, let's continue on here in Luke chapter 8. Starting in verse 40, it says this: "Now, when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She comes up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. 'Who touched me?' Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, 'Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you.' But Jesus said, 'Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me.' Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. And then he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace.' While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. 'Your daughter is dead,' he said. 'Don't bother the teacher anymore.' Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, 'Don't be afraid. Just believe, and she will be healed.' When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. 'Stop wailing,' Jesus said. 'She is not dead, but asleep.' They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, 'My child, get up.' Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened." So Jesus does this two incredible things. These mic drop moments, as the kids might say these days. These mic drop moments, these moments where everything just, it stops for a moment because it's unbelievable. He goes in he's on his way to Jairus' house. He hears that his daughter needs healing. He's on his way. The crowds are pressed in against him because they know who he is and they've seen these incredible things that he's done. And in fact, this woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, nobody had been able to figure it out. But she had heard about Jesus and knew if she just touched the hem of his garment, if he just touched the edge of his cloak, she could be healed. What incredible faith, because for 12 years, if you have a medical issue for 12 years and you aren't able to get better, how can you still have faith in that moment that Jesus is capable of doing something? It's when you see his power over and over and over at play that you know that he is able to bring healing. And she believes. And not only is this a physical healing, but this is a clean, unclean healing as well. That Jesus takes her from being unclean to being clean. And so she touches the hem of his garment. Jesus immediately notices, hey, something's different here. Power has left me. I know that something is not right. Something has changed. And he says, who touched me? And Peter's like, Jesus, there's a huge crowd around you. You're surrounded. Like, it could be anybody. And he says, no. Somebody has been healed here in this moment. I know it. And the woman identifies herself. Excuse me. She, in that moment, says, yes, it is me. And he says, your faith has healed you. This is that moment. Well, we see that Jesus not only has power over teaching and over nature and over the supernatural, but he also has power over illness. That this woman had been struggling with this sickness for years and years and years, and Jesus, just she touched his clothes, like she touched the bottom of his shirt, right? Like, and that power of God flowing through Jesus enters this woman and brings healing to her because of her faith and because of his power. Well, in the middle of all this, Jairus' servant comes and says, hey, or Jairus comes, not his servant, says, don't even bother coming. She's already died. And Jesus says, don't be afraid, just believe. Just believe, and she will be healed. And so they go into the house. Everybody's crying. Jesus says, she's not dead. She's just asleep. And everybody says, no, Jesus, you don't know. Like, we know. We watched it happen. We watched her die. We watched that moment of her giving her last breath. And Jesus says, nope, my child, get up. And she gets up immediately. He says, give her something to eat. And they are just blown away by this. Talk about a mic drop moment. And Jesus shows us that he has power over teaching, nature, the supernatural, illness, and yes, even death. That Jesus has the power and the authority to overcome death. You see, this is the power of Luke chapter 8, because as he continues to reveal himself to his disciples, he's showing them, look, I have power over it all of it. And this is important to us as followers of Jesus, because if our God is a powerful teacher, then we're going to know which direction we need to go in. If our God has power over nature, then we can come to him asking for rain, asking for what we need in the world. If he has power over the supernatural, we know that any evil force can be overcome by our Savior. If he has power over illness, we can come to him and ask for help because he can overcome it. And if he has power over death, which he shows in this story and he shows later on in the gospel by overcoming death himself, then we know that as followers of Jesus, people that are with him, that have been promised to him, that we will also overcome death with him. It is so very important that we as followers of Jesus know that he is powerful in all of these ways. That he is powerful in all of these things, because if that is true, and I believe it is, and I believe that you do also, then our God can overcome anything. There is nothing that can stop him. What an important and powerful lesson for us, because I think we also believe, like I talked about on Sunday, just this idea that sometimes our sin is too much for God. And if he's able to overcome these things, he can surely overcome our mistakes. The power of God at work. Well, in Luke chapter 9, there's a lot of stuff that happens, but I want us to skip ahead. Luke chapter 9, starting in verse 23. We could talk about more of these. There's these incredible things that happen. He feeds 5,000 people with just basically a happy meal, 5 loaves and 2 fish. Just this minuscule amount of food feeds thousands of people. Incredible. And following this passage that we're going to look at, takes place the transfiguration, where he goes up on the mountain with Peter, James, and John, and Elijah and Moses show up, and Peter freaks out and he's like, hey, we should build little houses for y'all. And Jesus is like, no, that's not what this is about. But in between there is something that I just want us to spend the rest of our time on together today. I want us to look at these 3 verses and talk just for a minute about where we are in this. So in Luke chapter 9, starting in verse 23, it says, "Then he said to them all, 'Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it.' What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very soul?" Some of the most powerful words of Jesus. The first thing he says is, if you want to be my disciple, you must deny yourself. You must deny yourself. And this thing, like, why is it so hard for us to deny ourselves? What is it that is difficult for you to say no to? As you think about denying yourself, what is it that is difficult to say no to? Is it food? You know, are donuts or cookies or sweets or whatever your vice? What is it for you? What's difficult for you to say no to? And that's a silly thing, but actually it can be a very serious thing. We make food very important in our lives. And sometimes that's something that is hard to deny ourselves. Maybe it's other things. What is it that is difficult for you to say no to? Jesus says, you must deny yourself. Those things that try to supersede ourselves and take front and center position, to take center stage, those are the things that we need to be denying ourselves, because they are trying to take the place of Jesus. You must deny yourselves. Then he goes on to say, you must deny yourselves and take up your cross daily. And I love that he says daily. You must deny yourself and take up your cross daily. I think sometimes when we think about following Jesus, it can be easy to transfer that to Sunday or Wednesday or whatever the case might be, or when it's convenient. But Jesus says, you need to take up this cross. You need to take up my mantle. You need to press forward in my steps daily. Daily. It's not a when it's convenient thing. It's an all the time, everyday thing. And then finally, he says, you must deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow me. And follow me. You know, as we think about walking in the steps of Jesus, it can be difficult. It can be difficult for us to be in the place where we need to be all the time. To be doing the things that Christ has called us to do. I think most all of us know cognitively, like, these are the things that I need to be doing for the sake of Jesus. But I also think there's times when we just don't put it together. It doesn't really click. It doesn't translate from our head to our feet, from our head to our hands. And so I hope today, as we think about being people that trust God, we want to trust Him to deny ourselves, that when we give up of those things, what we're really getting is so much more in the form of Jesus Christ. That when we take up our cross each and every day, that it's not a one-time thing. It's not a when it's comfortable or convenient thing, but it's an all-the-time thing. That it makes such a big difference. And not only that, but that we don't just know the things of Jesus, but we do the things of Jesus, that we follow Him, that we actually do what He says. And so that is chapter 8 and 9 for us today. And I hope as we continue on, I think Brandon Ward is teaching over the next couple of weeks. Man, I'm so thankful for this opportunity. I'm so thankful to get to speak to you about this. I hope that you will continue to build trust, knowing that God is powerful, knowing that Christ is powerful, and that He has called us to a life where we deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow Him. I hope that you'll be encouraged to do those things today, knowing that our God is able, that our God is powerful, and that our God is trustworthy. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a blessed week, and I hope to see you soon.